One of my sons is a senior art director with an advertising company. And I happened to be chatting it up with him one day, and I asked him, I said, if there's a word that would describe what many consumers are looking for today and that you might appeal to on your advertising, what would be that word that would more or less give definition to what people are in search of? And he didn't really pause. He just quickly came out and said, authenticity. He says, or something that's authentic. He said, if you look today, he says, many advertisers are appealing to the idea that this is the authentic thing. This is a true thing. It's real. It has substance to it. When I think of something being authentic, my mind does quickly go to it being true or to it being genuine. My grandmother used to say that it's the real McCoy or it's the real deal. I think it was even one of the soda companies that came up with the idea saying that it's the real thing. We don't necessarily think of when we say authentic that it's suggesting something that's a knockoff or you're going to get a substitute or some kind of a imitation, all of this. That's not necessarily our go-to. We are probably more of the mind that we want to see that it's the true thing. That's the true article or the true to what's being advertised. When we think of genuine, there's also this underlining assumption that it carries with it. It's the assumption that it's reliable and the assumption that it's dependable as well. We want to think that if we get the genuine, then we're getting something that has substance to it and has purpose in it and has value in it. There's a sense that comes along with that with the authentic, we can trust it. We feel as if we can trust the message that's being conveyed. We feel that we can trust the qualities that are involved in what it is. And we feel we can also trust the actions that are around it. It somehow, with something that's authentic, we feel, okay, it gives, we are able to lend something, and that's our trust in that. For many, that trust used to be or was in the church itself or in the institution of church. Yet, if we're really honest with ourselves, we'd probably all say that the church has been under some massive scrutiny and criticism, and it's justified, really. It's justified in many respects. But it's simply not over if it's relevant, which I think is a big thing about us. But it's not simply over whether it's relatable, but it's also whether we're reliable and whether we are trustworthy. We have probably had our fair share of problems over the recent years as churches and as the church in general. That's given people a pause in their ability to trust or what they could expect from the church, because they would expect something different. And those issues have been things that have been fairly public, things like financial scandals, sexual scandals, abuse scandals, scandals that involve matters of controlling people. Sometimes it's even more basic than that. Sometimes it's as basic as having made mistakes and plowed through something without apologizing, or creating misunderstandings, and even to the point where people's expectations have not been met. All this kind of invokes the idea of hypocrisy or pretense, and that we are not who we say we are. And to use a kind of a phrase that's probably out there a lot today is the word fake. Do we have a fake message? Are we saying something yet not living up to it? Are we fake in that context? Consequently, we probably find people today who are leaving the church and they're leaving church services. And I think with that comes a hunger that people have that are saying, okay, I don't have a problem with God, but I have a problem with what the version of church that I see today. And it's not just another version that people want. I think what people are actually looking for, and if I go back to what my son was saying, perhaps people are actually looking for authenticity. They're looking for something that's true, something that's genuine, something that they can actually put faith in or believe in, and believe in its message and its qualities. We've not answered this question very well. We've not answered these issues well. We primarily made our focus more on whether we are relative, whether we are relatable, particularly by changing and modernizing things like music, message, and mission. And if we've not done that, then perhaps maybe we've just maintained the status quo and hung in with that. There seems to be a lot of emphasis on being relatable. Seems to be a lot of emphasis on making it more appealing to people, making it more popular to people. Francis Chan, he in his book called Letters to the Church, he said, "I learned how to give people the experience they wanted." I don't think in looking for authenticity, that's what we want to do. And I think that's what he's saying as well. It's not in trying to be authentic, do we then say, what do people want? I think the focus comes back to really, what does God want? What does Jesus want? We can try changing the church by introducing new methods and new styles, and in some cases, even by changing doctrine. For some of us, this is our attempt to be genuine, our attempt to be more approachable, our attempt to be more authentic. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to bash that. I'm not trying to somehow say that these things are not important if we switch things up, because quite honestly, that can be helpful as well. But my question comes down to, does actually switching things up, does that answer the concern of authenticity? Does that address what people are really looking for? Are we simply trying to say this is what they need and what we think that they're looking for? Or are we more concerned about what God is looking for and what authentic really means in that context? Because what I am hearing, and what I'm hearing from people who particularly are that element outside the church today, they're looking for the church to be authentic. So in understanding what authentic church is, I think we have to go back and try to really see what the Bible really talks to us about in regards to this matter. If we're looking at authentic church, we have to understand what church really is. Church is not just a service. It's not a building that we see on a corner, and nor is it a charity. It's not a denomination. It's not a religious organization, nor is it a religious institution. Neither is it faceless. It's not this ambiguous entity that sits out there that we say, oh, the church, and really not know what that is, other than something that has a lot of ideas and thoughts, and something that's probably failing in this time. Church has something very intentional about it. And when God designed it, when God wanted it, he actually had a clear intent in his part. And part of it, our discovering and finding what is authentic, is really trying to understand what he had in mind, what his thoughts were about that. In Hebrews 12, verse 23, it mentions church in this context. It says, it is the church of the firstborn. And I like that phrase, because it more or less identifies the church with someone. And the firstborn is actually someone. The firstborn is Christ. And he's the firstborn because he was the first to rise from the dead. And so what Hebrews 12 is telling us is saying that the church belongs to him. He is the firstborn. He's not the CEO. He's not the commander-in-chief. He's not the idyllic figure that we have in a hierarchy. But it says that he is also the head of the body, which is the body of Christ. In other words, there's this organic thing about church belonging to Jesus. There's this organic thing about that we are identified with him. Romans 8:29 also says that he is the firstborn among many. Now, what this really says that the church belongs to Jesus, but the church is not just an institution that belongs to Jesus, but it's also people that have been born or been born again. And so really we get a real clear idea here of what it's saying is that he is the firstborn, but he's the firstborn among many. And with that, that's amazing, because now we're hearing that the church is people. The church is you and I. It's flesh and blood. The church is not just this ambiguous thing, but it's actually people. And it's people who have been born again. And I probably want to make that clear. The church is not just people who want to join it. The church is people who have given their lives to Christ, and they're joined to him in that. So, yeah, to be authentic, the church must be people who are born again, people who are part of that element of they belong to the firstborn. They belong to him, and they too have been reborn. Hebrews 3:1-6 says something very similar to this, but it's using a bit of a different comparison, which is a comparison of a house. It says that Jesus is the high priest over God's house. He's in charge, and then it goes on to say, of the entire house. But here's the neat part about that verse. It says, and we are that house. Again, there's this sense that the church is born out of Christ, and that the church identifies with Christ, not just saying that he is Lord, but it's part and parcel of him. It belongs to him, but it's also from him. It's through him that the church is joined to Christ. So the church is born again people. It's not faceless. It's not ambiguous. It's not without personality. It's not without character. It's very identifiable. We know what it is. It's you and it's me. People who have found themselves born again, who put their heart and faith in following Jesus. So if the church is under scrutiny and finding where there's people are suggesting hypocrisy, if they find themselves leaving that, they're not just leaving an institution, they're not just leaving an organization, they're not just leaving this ambiguous entity, they're actually leaving us. We are the church. People are actually walking away from us. It's not a system that needs to be changed. It's not a church that needs to change. Perhaps, and this is my suggestion, we need to change. Maybe we need to find what authenticity is about, what it is to authentically follow Christ and belong to him and identify with him. I believe the world is wanting authenticity. And much like I said in the beginning of this whole talk, is that I believe it wants this. I believe the world desires to see a message, hear a message they can believe in. I think they're wanting to see quality within the church itself. I think they want to see actions that are related to Jesus himself. Romans says that all creation is eagerly waiting for the people of God to mature, or for the people of God to become closer identified with Christ himself.